Supervisors meeting, recorded August 18, 2020.
It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the Portage County Board to order. Roll call.
All right. We have 7 supervisors attending remotely: Hano, Johnson, Robbie, Reeser, Zastro, Moresi, and Neal. 3 supervisors excused: Jankowski, Barry Jakowski, and Matt Jakowski. The other 14 supervisors are present in person.
The Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Supervisor Madine.
Loving God, we thank you for all the blessings that you have given us through your goodness. We ask that you grant us wisdom this evening to make decisions for Portage County that not only are for our best interest today, but keeping in mind those interests of future generations of Portage County citizens. We ask for compassion as we deal with issues that affect those citizens whose voices are not heard as they should be. Let us be that voice for them in a compassionate, caring, and kind way. Please grant us favorable weather so that our farmers are able to get into their fields, harvest their crops, and receive just compensation. As schools beginning in just a few weeks keep our most precious resource, the children of Portage County, safe as they begin a new school year. Open their minds to learn, experience joy, and become productive citizens in our community. Bless all of the people who will educate these people. We ask that you bless all of the brave women and men of our county who are serving in the armed forces, keeping us safe. Please bless their families. We also ask that you bless and keep safe all the men and women who serve us as EMTs, peace officers, and fighter fighters. And one more thing, we are thankful for all the women who for 100 years today have been able to fully participate in all elections. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I didn't include sandbags.
Review and approval of July 21st, 2020 County Board minutes. Motion by Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Moore. Any corrections or changes? All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Correspondence.
Wisconsin Counties Association Chair Hager was elected to the Board of Directors. Wisconsin Counties Association Wisconsin Counties Officials Directory. Central Wisconsin Airport Julie Ulrich dissolution of the Business Advisory Committee, and the Town of Plover position on countywide mask ordinance. You also found on your desk the governor's order for the mask order that was sent out to you previously, and I just wanted to give you guys a handout for that with the FAQs as well.
Hello.
Is that Stan?
Yes. I'm trying to get in my computer and nothing is working.
We lost Stan. We've got him back though. So, all right. Presentations. Justice Program Director Andrea Balke, recognition of Honorable Judge Flugar for his service on the Portage County Adult Drug Treatment Court.
As you know, Judge Flugar has stepped down as our treatment court judge. And I was asked to give a brief overview of his time while he's with the treatment court. The great Kate Kipp, who had the position before myself, gave a short story last week when she talked about in her 2015 job interview. She was asked, "What do you know about drug court?" And she said, "I didn't really know how to answer that question." And since that time, Portage County has jumped in and gone full force with bringing the treatment court to our county. Judge Flugar assembled several community members that supported and even opposed the creation of the treatment court. Several hundred hours of meetings, trainings, and just reading of documents, drug court in Portage County became a reality. And on April 3rd, 2017, the first drug court took place. During that time, drug court has had many frustrating moments, some sad moments, and also some very happy moments. Judges are required to commit 2 years to the drug court, and Judge Flugar committed 3.5 years, with his last hearing being held on August 10th. At the end of each participant, when they graduate from drug court, statistics are given on what they have accomplished while they were in drug court. On Judge Flugar's second to his last court hearing, the treatment team put together statistics for him of what he accomplished while he was in drug court. So I'm going to share a few of those today. The number of hearings that he had held while he was a drug court participant was 173 hearings. The number of days that he was in drug court was 1,226 days. The number of hours he was in drug court was 29,424. And the number of minutes that he was in drug court was 1,765,440. The number of applauses that he gave to participants when they were congratulated on their sober days was 3,836. The number of drug-free babies that were born in drug court were 7. The number of graduates were 14, and the number of lives directly impacted through immediate family, secondary families, even employers was over 100. So with all of that, I'd like to thank Judge Flugar for all of his time and everything he's done for drug court for Portage County.
All right, well, thank you very much. I certainly did not get involved in adult drug treatment court to get awards, as I said to our oversight committee when they also had given me a departing gift. But there are a few comments that I would like to make, and that is what I tell our participants all along. And we had a lot of them. 14 graduated, probably 16 or 17 were discharged. They didn't make it. And there's still a number that are trying to get through that process. And I tell them all that it takes a village in order to be successful. You've heard that expression many times, to raise a child. In order to be successful and live a drug-free life, I tell our participants all the time that they have to surround themselves with sobriety, meaning that they have to be involved with other individuals who embrace the sober life, be at NA meetings, have a sponsor, have a lot of support from the community in terms of their employers, and I've been extremely impressed with employers from Portage County who have hired individuals who have been in our drug court. They reveal to them immediately that they're in drug court and what their obligations are, which is it's a treatment court, and they have 3 counseling sessions each week, 2 groups and 1 individual. And so it's treatment, plus they meet with their case manager on a weekly basis, their probation agent every other week, and they come to court either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, depending on where they are. So they surround themselves with sobriety. In order to have a successful treatment court, you have to also have a village and a lot of people that support it. So I'm up here getting an award that really goes to everybody in Portage County that supported this, including the county board. And you are the ones that supported this and allowed us to apply for a grant, and knowing that Portage County would have to kick in their share, which is, I think, a third, and the grant covers 2/3. And I applaud all of you for supporting that and other alternatives that we have in Portage County, whether it's the day report program, the pretrial supervision program, the electronic monitoring, ankle bracelet program. These are all things that are other ways of handling offenders and treating offenders within the community. So when it comes to having a successful treatment court, law enforcement had to buy in, which they have, and they're part of the team, and they're at weekly meetings, and they they vote as to who gets in, who is discharged. They make random stops. The DA's office has to be supportive of this, the public defender, probation and parole, treatment providers. So there's a whole host of people that make this happen. Andrea does a lot of work behind the scenes. Kate Kipp, I don't know if she's appearing or watching this today, wrote the grant virtually herself and really provided the impetus to get this going. I think it's a wonderful alternative. Offenders, we need a whole host or array of alternatives. Can't put everybody in jail, can't put everybody in prison, can't give everybody a fine. Some people deserve those things. Others deserve another chance at life, and so do their families and their children. And when you have a success, and we've had some great successes, it affects not only them, but their family and their children. We've had graduation ceremonies right here in this room in which kids that were in foster care are now back living with their moms, and moms and dads who are unemployed are living on their own. They are supporting themselves and their families, and so it's very rewarding. There's a lot of I don't know, I guess consternation at times too, because not everything goes as you would plan. But I appreciate the support of the county board for supporting treatment court. I think it'll be very successful in the future, and I hope you continue to support it. So I applaud you.
Next is a COVID update. We've got Wisconsin Counties Association Executive Director Mark O'Connell, who is on our WebEx, along with Attorney Andy Phillips for Von Briesen Roper on WebEx, and Health and Human Services Director Ray Shabilsky. We're going to start with Mark, if you would.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, all county officials in attendance. First off, let me just commend Portage County, the judge, and the entire team on your incredibly successful drug court. And those are just incredibly impressive numbers. And I mean, the numbers we don't see are how many people are really better off in Portage County because of the efforts of the drug court. So my compliments and commendations. Quick update on the legislative activity related to COVID-19. In Madison, the activity really is primarily restricted to orders by DHS and the governor's office. And I think Andy will speak to that briefly. The real action on legislative activity is occurring at the federal level. At the federal level, just to give you a quick update, the House in Congress had put a package on the table to address lost revenue by states and localities, cities, towns, villages, counties. They put a $3 trillion package on the table. The White House and Senate Republicans countered with essentially a much, much smaller package. Well, we have the sides have narrowed. We are now looking at a $2 trillion package in the House and potentially up to a $1 trillion package by the White House and the Senate Republicans. And there's lots of things that we care about in that package, but one of the primary items is the dollars that we put to states and local units of government in recognition of lost revenue as a result of COVID. Now, in that case, where the House started was $1 trillion, where the White House started was much smaller. Where we are now, the House is currently at $500 billion. The White House is at $150 billion for states and local units of government. And the division on that is roughly 50-50. So 50% would go to the states, 50% to the local units of government. And in the local units of government pot, 50% would go to municipalities, cities, towns, villages, and 50% to counties. So that is a very significant amount of money. The dollar amount that I think we can look to although negotiations are not being held publicly right now, they're being held privately, and will heat up perhaps in early September. The sides have essentially gone home, although there is still conversation going on. But to expect something in the 150 to 500 billion, most analysts who are looking at this are looking at some dollar amount going to states and locals in recognition of revenue loss. And we have had revenue loss. And if we haven't had revenue loss yet in terms of state and local taxes, we are likely to see it as this shakes out through the economic cycle. A couple of the sticking points in the federal package, two major sticking points: funding for schools and unemployment insurance. Those are two major items. On the dollar amount, or on the item of dollars to state and locals, one of the primary sticking points is the allocation and how the allocation would be made. The National Association of Counties, and they have done tremendous work on behalf of counties on this issue, they are advocating that the dollars go directly from the Treasury, U.S. Treasury, right to counties and cities, towns, and villages. Some other folks are arguing that the dollars should go to the states, and then the states should allocate. States have a tendency, not all the dollars always flows through when the state is in the stream. So the National Association of Counties is advocating direct allocation. The White House is not very warm to that idea, but they may give on that idea as negotiations continue. At the same time, it's much more likely than not that the dollars will go to the states and then reallocated to the counties, likely based on a very simple formula, probably something along population lines. Nevertheless, as 70,000 people in Portage County on a base of 5.5 million, we're 1.2% or so of the population. That is still a very significant amount of money, given the allocations that we're talking about. That's sort of the update on legislative activity when it comes to COVID-19. And I think, I guess I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman, and answer any questions if the body has anything they'd like to ask.
I'll hold the questions till the end for everyone, if you would, please. Mr. Phillips, if you next, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and other parties. Pleasure to be here virtually tonight. Wanted to provide an update on the legal mandate from Madison and the legal landscape as it relates to all of the various elements that comprise safer at home, if you will, type orders. At the end of July 30th, Governor Evers issued Executive Order 82. That Executive Order 82 then led to Emergency Order number 1 being issued on August 1st. Emergency Order number 1 imposed a statewide face covering mandate. That face covering mandate is set to expire on September 28th. It's not set to expire for any reason related to the pandemic itself. It's set to expire because that's the extent of the governor's emergency powers under State Statute Chapter 323 of the statutes. One thing that I think people confuse is they think that this type of emergency order is similar to the Emergency Order 28 that was struck down by the Supreme Court in the Legislature v. Palm decision issued in mid-May. It's different. It's different in that it was issued under a different set of statutes, and it has a different shelf life, if you will, because it was issued under that different set of statutes. The order cannot simply be extended beyond September 28th. What needs to happen legally is Governor Evers has to issue a new executive order that would declare a new state of emergency and thereby would authorize an additional order that would impose masking requirements or other requirements. Unlike what happened with Emergency Order 28 back earlier this spring, there has not been a legal challenge filed to that masking mandate. And there are various reasons to that. First, as I mentioned, it was issued under a different set of statutory authorizations. But second, for the most part in the states, the polling suggests that the population views quite favorably the masking mandate, does not view it as intrusive or problematic as the previously struck down Emergency Order 28. And so we don't believe that there will be a legal challenge filed against Emergency Order 1 with the mask mandate. From what we've heard on the legislative side, we know that there is some support for some sort of challenge, whether it be legal or through the legislature intervening to eliminate the emergency order. But again, given what we've got with the state of politics, we don't believe that such action on the part of the legislature is imminent, and we don't think that that will necessarily happen. So that's the mask mandate. And again, that mandate is in place until September 28th. What that mandate does, it imposes the mask requirement, and it says to all localities throughout Wisconsin, this is the floor. You have to comply with this order. Municipalities, counties, health departments, you're free to regulate above and beyond what's required in this emergency order number 1, but you can't go below. In other words, you can't, at the local level, eliminate the face mask mandate or otherwise alter the effective terms of that mandate. And so then the question comes up, well, as counties, are there things that we can do beyond what is set forth in emergency order number 1? And in light of what the Supreme Court did, frankly, in the legislature v. Palm case. And so as a result of that, the Counties Association created an ad hoc committee. Mark O'Connell immediately, the day after the legislature v. Palm decision came down, called me and said, boy, there seems to be a lot of concern and discussion out there about what's next. We should put a committee together and we should really analyze this and provide some guidance to counties out there. And so the committee did. It got together and just last week issued guidance, giving counties a level of information, of knowledge that will assist counties as different counties discuss, deliberate, and weigh the merits of additional enhanced regulatory authority. And so that guidance is out there. And I'll note that we had a webinar to go through the guidance yesterday. We're going to have another one tomorrow at 11 a.m. where we walk through the guidance and talk about what it means and what the future is for counties as it relates to their legal authority and ability to enact further and additional regulations if that's their choice. One thing we know is that all 72 counties are going to react in a different way, and that's fine. But what all 72 counties should have is, again, that foundational support that the guidance provides so that we don't argue about what the law is. We have an honest debate about what type of public policy measures counties need to put in place in order to best preserve the health, safety, and welfare of their citizens. So with that, that's an overview of the mask mandate and an overview of local regulations as it relates to so-called safer at home. Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you if there are any questions that I or Mark can address from you or the board.
Speak here, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
It's a tough act to follow when you have Mark O'Connell and Andy Phillips to do that. So anyway, just a quick follow-up here. Andy was just talking about that guidance that was issued. We started several months ago and we introduced the fact at the Health and Human Services Board that we had to look at Chapter 4 of our county ordinance. That Chapter 4 of our county ordinance does cover, the health conditions of the county. It's outdated. We know we needed to update it, but we truly are looking and we're waiting for this guidance. I unfortunately could not make the meeting yesterday, but we'll plan on attending that meeting tomorrow, when they're going to go over that guidance. Chapter 4, it's going to allow us to take a look at things when it comes to communicable disease, but it's more than just COVID. It's all communicable diseases that we can look at. It's also, we'll have, we need to look at and update that ordinance around human health hazards and things like that. So we did introduce that to the HHS board. We told the board it was going to come back, and it will. We're just waiting for this to happen. So, that's kind of that update from there. Just again, because I get the fortunate experience to come and speak to you every month. Lately, where we're at today, if you have not seen, is we are at 470 cumulative positive cases since the beginning of the outbreak. We've had 9,830 negative tests since the beginning of the outbreak, but we've also had, out of those 470 confirmed, 433 people have recovered, or so 92% of the people that have been diagnosed positive have recovered. And we currently since the beginning of the pandemic, we've had 26 total hospitalizations. Currently, 2 people are hospitalized because of COVID. So we also have not experienced any death or recorded deaths here in Portage County. And since I'm looking at the medical examiner back there, that's what reminded me to say that. So if you have any questions for myself or Andy or Mark O'Connell, I guess now's the time to ask.
We've got a question from home from Executive Holman. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just for Andy, and it's less of a question, more of a curiosity in terms of, could you please, I think part of the thing that drives some of the reason behind the importance of the guidance is the relationship between statute and administrative code. And in the sense that in a lot of areas of statute, the administrative code says county shall do X, Y, Z. But in this case, that doesn't always exist. And so that's what the guidance is trying to help us think through. And that might help explain some of the questions people have had about why this is necessary in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Executive Holman. I appreciate you bringing that up. Guidance lays out the whole categories of various functions, duties, powers, and authority of a health officer when it comes to dealing with a communicable disease. Mr. Shabilsky was correct. This is dealing with beyond COVID. It's dealing with all communicable disease. And so when you look at the statute in the administrative code, if somebody who has contracted a communicable disease and as a health officer, you want to make sure that person is unable to transmit to members of the public. In other words, you want to protect the general public from that person who has a communicable disease. You can do things like isolate and quarantine that individual. And the statutes have a particular process that you go through called isolation and quarantine. And it involves the court system where you can petition a judge and have the judge order certain remedial measures against that person. Likewise, if you have a particular location, if it's in business, for example, or a factory where a large number of workers, all of a sudden we have an outbreak of a communicable disease, there are measures that the statutes and the administrative code recognize the health officer can take to address that particular outbreak situation. And in the voluntary compliance, which is always the goal, but in the event we don't get voluntary compliance, we go to a court. We say, Judge, we ask you to order these certain things. The administrative code, again, provides remedy in the event that the health officer asks the judge to order and the judge agrees. When it comes to the questions, what do? It's the orders of general applicability. An order that comes out says every person within Portage County has to do a certain thing or refrain from doing a certain thing. And it's a question where the state and the administrative code do not provide that sort of concrete remedial process to say this is how the order looks and this is how it's enforced. That's where the questions come from. That's what the guidance goes through. In reality, the guidance is designed to deal with a very small subset of what it is that a health officer is asked to do, and that is on orders that apply to the general public. How do we create a system whereby those orders are processed and enforced in an orderly way, consistent with what we see Portage County values to be?
Supervisor Gifford.
Yeah, it's a question for Director O'Donnell, if he can answer.
Go ahead.
Okay, with respect to the WCA and its actions, I would hope WCA is doing the absolute maximum to lobby for the direct allocation of those funds that you spoke about. The reason being that I think in response to the COVID crisis, our legislature has been asleep at the wheel or absent without leave with respect to providing economic relief for the enormous economic stress that our people are under. And sorry about that. The direct allocation is the only thing that makes sense to me, because all the legislature has been doing is trying to block the governor from governing rather than providing relief to our people.
Mark?
A couple points related to that. One of the ways that we are affected financially as counties is in sales tax revenue. I mean, our property tax is fairly stable unless we have delinquencies and people do not pay, and we have settlement issues that are coming up shortly. But one of the primary areas is sales tax. In that regard, we're all over the board as counties when it comes to what up or down from last year. Now, I direct you to Forward Analytics, the research element or arm of WCA. They've got some really nice tools on the website, forwardanalytics.net, and you can do some calculations as to what you think is going to happen in your county, and it will churn out some dollar amounts or estimates on sales taxes. The net allocation and the state is going to be in a difficult spot. The governor and the legislature are both going to be in a very difficult spot because income taxes actually will go down as a result of COVID-19, and sales taxes look like overall, even though county by county it'll be different, will go down. So the state's going to have some troubles. In that regard, our attention has been shifted to the federal government, and that's what you're speaking of, Supervisor, as for our lobbying effort. We are working hand in hand with the National Association of Counties, with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, with the National League of Cities, and some of the other groups at the national level to advocate that Congress, if they are going to have a fourth package, and that looks increasingly like it is going to be the case, that it does include a portion for state and local lost revenue, and secondly, that it does include an allocation that goes right from Treasury to the locals. That last piece is going to be the most difficult. The first piece, whether we're going to have a package, seems to be much more the case today than a month ago. The middle piece, which is, are we going to have an allocation for state and federal? Well, the parties are at 500 and 150. So we are no longer at zero. So one would logically think that we're going to end up somewhere in the middle there. So all of these signs point positive, but it is politics. So anything could happen. But to the gentleman's point, we have been in contact with our federal delegation on numerous occasions. And I thank those on the Portage County Board that have contacted our federal delegation on behalf of counties, because people all across the state have done it. Very, very helpful. We are in frequent contact with the delegation, and that is where our attention is at the federal level to get an allocation direct to counties.
Yeah, I have a question for Ray, just to clarify. A lot of my constituents and people I talk to get confused on this, the amount of people tested positive, the 474 figure. Does that figure include people that keep coming back every week that are active and then you get tested positive for that? And of the 474, how many are active right now? It implies that we got 474 active cases, but I don't think that's the case. If you could clarify that.
Sure. And first of all, that's an unduplicated count. So that's not the number of tests given, that's the number of individuals that have tested positive. Okay. So that's the answer to your first question. And so to the second question, currently that we would have 37 people that are active, if you want to look at it that way, in Portage County. Okay. So those are people that have confirmed positive tests that have not yet recovered.
Okay, so the 474 seems high, but 37
are active, yes. And again, that's the number of confirmed positives since the beginning of this pandemic.
Because a lot of people I talk to, they think the 474 are, oh my gosh, we got an outbreak of 474 people, when it's active cases are really only 37.
Correct. Okay. And that will change tomorrow again, because if we added 3 or 4 tonight, then that number is going to shift.
Ultimately, we want to get to 0. So
ultimately, that's what we want.
Okay,
absolutely.
And I guess the way I look at it, the active number is like the speedometer on your car, and the 470 is more like your odometer on your car. It's a cumulative. The other one goes up and down. So, anybody else have any questions for our panelists? Anybody at home have any questions? No? With that, then I thank Mr. O'Connell and Mr. Phillips. I know you gentlemen are both very busy, and I appreciate you taking time out for us. You were very helpful, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Sheriff Lucas, Sheriff Office 2019 Annual Report. Riveting.
Good
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit fast. If you have some questions at the end, feel free. I got to put on my glasses so I can read. I'm going to fog. 2019 was a challenging year because we had a lot of change, turnover in our sheriff's office, so we were working with that. Thanks to you, we reestablished our community policing officer that actually started due to the fact of staffing issues was actually August 1st, so now we are implementing office hours out in the townships that we are working diligently to do, but with COVID right now, it is kind of challenging. So as soon as I get the schedule for where the community officer will be for the during the work week, I will let everybody know. Our electronic monitoring program that we'll see coming up in the corrections facility also has been ongoing and strong throughout the year. We also, in 2019, we're finishing up the off-site impound down at Highway. But let you know that is operational now. They're just putting in one additional feature, but that's a nice facility for in facility and also thermostat and keeping things out of the elements. And again, I talked about the personal changes. We had the chief deputy, the operations captain, the jail sergeant, property evidence sergeant, and emergency medical services coordinator all vamoose on 2019. So we had a lot of filling, a lot of learning, and I'm very happy to say with all the people in there, I'm very confident in regards to how things are operating now. Also, last year, we took over emergency medical services back in 2018. We were able to successfully negotiate the EMS contracts. So that was a big hurdle last year to complete. You can see on the horizon, we have a few things in regards to emergency 911 and some other things in this year that we're working on. And I'll keep you updated and through our committee informed. So, the next page you can see is staffing levels. Again, I thank you for the position that was allocated for this year for our community position. We requested 2 deputies, 2 corrections, and 2 communications, and one of the deputies was approved. You can also see, I'm just kind of, like I said, going kind of fast through here because I know you got a big agenda tonight. In regards to operations in our detective bureau, Crime is increasing. They were active last year with our 5 detectives with 214 active cases being investigated. But I think on page 14 is the most alarming statistic that when I was talking about the second deputy, I think this is what I'm talking about in regards to the drugs throughout Portage County. Now, realizing that Portage County, there isn't arrest of people for minor offenses or minor possessions, but just take a look at 2019 in regards to the drugs seized and the cases that were reported in 2019 through our Central Wisconsin Drug Task Force. You can see the drastic increase of what's called methamphetamines, and that's 2,643 grams compared to last year 1,798, year before 1,084. You can also see that heroin is kind of leveled off in regards to the use, but I think that you're going to see coming up in the press and you're going to see coming up throughout Portage County that overdoses deaths increased dramatically this year from last year. Last year we had 5 overdose deaths already. We're at 9 here in Portage County. So we have some serious issues, and that's why I will strongly keep pushing for another drug officer, because our drug officer can't keep up with the caseloads that we have now. Next, you can look at the court services report. Again, we enacted the court services unit back when I was still the court sergeant. You can see how many people are screened by our court services of 32,710. You can also see the law enforcement actions I think is important to look at in regards to 596 inmates are escorted up here, and there were 1,262 transports to those court appearances. Communication center. We are, I think, we're training right now, but I think we're actually fully staffed right now with the 19 communications, which is, according to the 2000 study, we're still way understaffed, but we're actually full staff for once in our communications. So can we get applause? Yay. You can see some of the major events that occurred back in 2019. We had the major flooding, and we also had the major storm. What I really think you should look at where it says on July 20th and 21st, our communications center received 2,134 calls. That's in a 2-day stretch. We received almost 13,000 calls for the year, and in 2 days we received 2,100. So pretty impressive. They do an outstanding job in the Comtech. You can also see, we have emergency management under the sheriff's office. You can see that that kind of goes hand in hand with those 2 major events, but look at what emergency management has done. This year, I'll jump to just a tad because our EOC has been opened up since this pandemic has hit. They are on top of the ball in regards to the events that go on and assisting our municipalities and the FEMA funds that are out there for reimbursement. And you can look through in regards to the month by month that the EMS people have given you. Emergency medical, you can see that we have 4 basic networks of ambulance providers with 12 emergency medical responder groups. Again, we were able to successfully negotiate the contract, so we have a contract out for 5 years. And we will start probably negotiating next year again for another contract in the future. Corrections office, with the jail captain leaving, preparing to, we were able to preempt in regards to training. So we got a lot of people in regards to trained up before our captain left this year. Our electronic monitoring program has been very successful. That is saved the county nearly $144,000 in regards to housing. Our juvenile detention center also saved the county about $50,850, along with the generating revenue of about $391,000 last year. Our cumulative cost for our jail is our contract with Waupaca County with our safe keepers, along with our travel costs is about $650,000 a year. This year, you'll see our jail beds probably are going down in regards to the daily average, but yet it's still going to be 90 to 100. So, I mean, we're still up there. We're still shipping our max over to Waupaca County. Let's see if there's anything else here. I think that you can look to in regards to the community engagement. That's always been a strong suit, but it's really tough right now with COVID, because we canceled just about all our community engagement events. And so we're hoping that this pandemic slows down, but you can see what we did back in 2019. Any questions? Any questions for the sheriff? Anybody at home? Do you have some? Supervisor Madine.
On page 40, you just mentioned, Sheriff, that the average daily population is 99.6. It says in the jail. But is that really in the jail, or is that are confined either in our jail or another jail?
What page you on?
40.
That is the adult jail. The average daily population in our jail for 2019 was 99.6.
Our jail, not the combined between us and...
No, that would be total. That would be on my electronic monitoring over in Waupaca and also in our facility.
What is the total?
Yep.
Well, it's not in our jail. It's combined with the other jail. Okay.
Correct. You have to look at the whole number, because if by chance electronic monitoring something happened, I had to yank them all back in. Waupaca County has an outbreak of COVID. I need to yank everybody over. I have to have 100 beds.
Thank you.
Yep. Oop. Anybody else? Supervisor Gifford.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I spoke to you about a week ago about a resolution that I'm putting together to call on the legislature to increase funding for domestic violence response, at the level of our Family Crisis Center, as well as in the Health and Human Service Division. And then you mentioned to me the alarming rise in the overdose deaths, and just the number of cases of violence that you've seen, and I think are related to the stress coming down from the pandemic. So I'll be submitting this to Supervisor Pataki for the Safety Committee because Director Shabelsky didn't think that was the right thing to land in HHS department. I was calling for 50% increase for, agencies that deal with domestic violence and also some increase to the sheriff's department about, these drug cases, which I think is definitely related to the, it's sort of an after effect of the pandemic. And I don't think these stresses are going to go away anytime soon. So Representative Shanklin told me by email that it's $15 million for these services that I'm talking about. And so this is a call for a 50% or $7.5 million increase. And Director Shabelsky tells me, well, that's a drop in the bucket in our state budget. So hopefully I'll email this to Supervisor Pataki tonight, and maybe it may not be timely to get on the next meeting tomorrow, but perhaps the next one after that.
Well, the meeting is until next week. The agenda is due tomorrow. But yeah, when you did call me, I looked up the statistics from January 1st till the time we talked, and I saw a 50% increase in assaults, batteries, domestics, also suicide attempts, mental health. It kind of correlates all in one. So yes, it's been a 50% increase from last year to this year in regards to those. So during this COVID, I mean, our officers are extremely busy in regards to these cases right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I've heard a lot of people are talking about defunding the police, because of all the events that have gone on. But other people are coming at it from the point of view of let's upfund services that help prevent police interventions. In other words, things like domestic violence services, mental health, drug counseling, all these sorts of things. And certainly the money can be made available. It's out there, but it just takes some political will.
And I've been always for improvement of services to improve people's, well-being. So I'm always open to suggestions, and if there's something that can be done to combat some of this.
I would say, Supervisor Gifford, you should email it if it's ready to go to Sheriff Lucas and also to Stan tonight, and they can look at it tomorrow and see if it's ready to be added to the agenda, or if it needs to wait and go on the next one. So, but the packet sounds like it's ready to go out tomorrow.
I just wanted to clarify to Supervisor Pataki that Supervisor Gifford did give me a copy of that, and I will talk with him after the meeting tonight to see if he wants it on the agenda.
Okay. Do we have Stan on there? Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the sheriff? Anybody at home? Oh, Supervisor Andy.
Mr. Chairman, I read the sheriff's report, and I guess two things comes to mind. One of them is staffing, the other one is facilities. Obviously, the staffing is needed based on the numbers as you have seen it. And I took a look at on page 42 of your report, and just the pictorial aspect of the condition of the facilities is there's no way to treat employees or have reproductive work out of situations like that. So, having said that, plus the COVID thing, the question comes to mind for me as an individual. Staffing would come first, facilities would come second, and then the rest of it sort of fill in the holes wherever we can. But what kind of timeline do you have to take a look at these two issues, and where do we go next?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. This has been since 2015, since I've been elected. I've done studies. We've had numerous firms come up, give us studies in regards to what should be, what shouldn't be. I can't make those decisions. The county board and the county can, in regards to the facilities, in regards to the staffing. You know, I look every year in regards to our neighboring counties, in regards to the county sheriff's office, how many different law enforcement agencies are in other counties compared to their staffing, and we by far are about half of what the other counties are. We do a lot with the amount of people we have, and I can give you facts in regards to the amount of staffing for other facilities and other law enforcement, but Portage County only has Stevens Point Police, Plover, and Portage County Sheriff's Office. Other sheriff's office and other counties throughout the state have usually 8 or 9 different police departments throughout the cities and their small villages and towns. So our officers, as you can see on page like 1 or 2 of there, I mean, we can have 3 officers for 810 square miles of the Portage County. So I will keep preaching that we need more staff. I will keep preaching that and preaching it and preaching it, because I'm most concerned about officer safety and our staff safety. And when it comes down to facilities, you see the ongoing thing. We're going to have multiple costs coming up in regards to trying to replace things and fix things. That's the route that we've taken so far, just for the fact of because of costs. But I know that in my capital improvement proposals throughout the years, we have anything from $26 to $30 million for addition on the sheriff's office, to $100 and some million for a new justice center and all-inclusive building. It hasn't been received well, and the thing about it is our population has plateaued, stayed fairly level. So people think, well, we're doing this, let's just keep peeling the beds out of county. But we still have upkeep for the building. We still have mandatory things through the Department of Corrections that we have to do. So coming up, we're still going to have major renovations in regards to things that we have to take care of, because there's parts not available for our facility anymore.
And I know that Supervisor Don Jankowski is not here, and they're working on a questionnaire to get sent out to the supervisors in regards to those questions to try and get some idea of people's concerns or their thoughts, so that that committee can try and continue to move forward. So, Supervisor Ande, do you have another question or a follow-up?
I'm just trying to take a look at page 2. And you got 3 districts. In my opinion, you have an officer assigned to the north, 1 to the south, and in my opinion, a rover in the middle, because that's where the village and the city fill in the extra stuff. That's my analysis, not yours. But I don't know who to ask the question from, because I'm not exactly sure. Have you talked this thing to death and kicked the can down the road for years, from what you have said? Or are we planning on something, or do we have another officer in a budget, or what's the plan? How are we going to solve the problem?
I am not the first sheriff that addressed this. Yep.
I'm not trying to catch people off base.
I know that we have worked tirelessly to try and figure out how to get a facility, whether it's the sheriff's office is included with a jail and a courthouse, or other facilities. And as the sheriff has stated, we have gone around and around. I wish Don was here, because Don was here at the very beginning when all this started. I have a newspaper clipping. I don't know if it goes back to 2009 or 2007, where they were bringing something in front of it, looking at a $27 million project at the time. Well, just the cost of waiting has a cost associated with it, because cost of materials and labor for new construction continues to go up. So, and I think we were looking at a much larger facility, and that has scaled down or scaled back. But we continue to try and figure out what we can do as far as a facility, and we're still working on that. As far as staffing, we face increasingly tight budgets, and everybody's fighting for that same piece of pie. And I don't know if we start looking at, we're going to add officers or add to that. It's gotta come from someplace else as well. So those are the challenges. And I said when I took this position that this particular body is going to have some difficult ones to make. And those are some of the facts and some of the things that we're dealing with at this time. Supervisor Pataki at home, and then Supervisor Strike.
Mr. Chairman and fellow supervisors, I was around when they built that thing we have.
Here you go.
I won't even call it a building or a jail. It was built to a money amount. They thought Wood County added on to their prison jail for $3 million. And the building committee back in the 90s decided that, well, if they can do it, so we can do it too. But we were building a new facility. Well, they come up with a $3 or $4 million. And when the architect came in and took the square footage, at that time we were in the old Ford garage. And what he did, he took the square footage of that, and that's what he put into the new building. So we had about the same amount of space in the new building that we had in the old Ford garage. And as a matter of fact, we had a lot more room in the Ford garage for our vehicles. I mean, it was a huge garage with a lift to for our mechanic to do all the preventive maintenance on our squad cars, which saved a lot of time when an officer would come in to do reports. The mechanic would grab it, do the work on it, and by the time it was done, the officer was done. We had very little downtime. So we got what we paid for.
Thank you, Supervisor Strike.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. I greatly appreciate everything you and your department does. You guys do a fantastic job, in my opinion. And this question isn't necessarily directed right to you, but I am going to ask you for your thought. I've sat back here tonight listening to all of our speakers, our county board supervisors, and yourself as well. And for the numbers that I've heard, we had 5 overdose deaths in 2019. We are now currently at 9 for 2020. We're 2/3 of the way through 2020, and we're almost up 100% on overdose deaths. Would you consider this a pandemic?
I've said that all along, that right now in our county with the drugs and what's going on with the saves that our EMS does with the Narcan and throughout the county, the drug epidemic that we have, yes, I would consider it.
And you would say we probably have more than 37 active drug users in the county?
I would think yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for the sheriff?
I know what he was going for.
No, if not, thank you, sir. County Executive Holman, budget update.
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheriff. The sheriff likes to give me flack for taking too much time, so I, like him, will make good on my promise to be brief. But that being said, generally speaking, we're really entering into the budget hearing session. So this week we started meeting with small departments. That will continue this week. Large departments this week.
You're making it impossible for us to do our jobs. The mayor's a bully.
Sorry. Overall, counties are doing well with sales tax, which is good because early on that was a source of worry for a lot of folks in terms of where that might head with the forecasts. If you've looked at the tool that Forward Analytics has put together, and if you haven't, I suggest you should, just to kind of get your mind wrapped around it. It's a pretty volatile statistic, but this month, July, we are above or over 2019 July by 3.9%. So that's good. But because of the volatility in general for the year so far, we're just slightly over last year. August is expected to dip down again. Just as a reminder, this statistic is a 2-month look back. And so then you're kind of always looking into the past to see where you're at now with the numbers. But in any case, sales tax has not so far been as much of a problem as people thought it would be. We had our colleagues from the WCA here earlier. Moving forward, the state's finances will be a focus of our county leadership calls, which happen once or twice a week and have been for several months now. That's going to be big because it will help us kind of wrap our minds around where we're headed with our own county budget processes, and also how that shakes out with the federal package that's being put together. We'll see what impacts that may have. A lot of the discussion has been on potentially seeing reductions in state funding to counties if and when direct relief from the federal government comes to us. Whether or not that happens, we'll see, but it's something that we're keeping our eye on. By the end of this month, we should have a very rough idea of where things are at, what we're looking at, because we'll have been through many of the departments. Of course, there are several departments that take longer to work through. Just as a reminder, a lot of the state allocations for Health and Human Services didn't come through to us until I think it was 3 days before I presented the budget to you. So there's a frantic amount of work there at the very end, but hopefully we'll have fewer delays in those arenas so that we can keep our process moving. The prioritized discretionary programs and services that department heads identified for me a couple of years ago, I've been going through those, and I'll bring a summary of those to finance later this month so people can kind of get an idea of what does that even look like as part of the overall process, and to keep everything on the table, in other words. And lastly, we do continue to use the CARES Act funding and routes to recovery funding to assist in our response to the virus. We're looking for ways to continue to use that funding so that we are making sure we're spending that before we spend our own money. So that's been a tremendous help in a lot of ways, and we'll continue to take advantage of that whenever possible. If people have any questions, happy to answer them.
Questions for the exec? Anybody at home? With that, thank you, Mr. Holman. Next item, Supervisor Johnson, complete count update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now is the time when my dog decided to start barking, so please forgive that. I will be as brief as possible and speak loudly because there's a terrible, terrible person on the sidewalk driving my dog crazy, and you'll have to put up with my voice and the dog in the background. So first, I just want to mention that Portage County is very lucky to have such an amazing group of people who were so willing to step up and help with the Census Committee. I didn't know what to expect, and I think I said this before. Didn't know what to expect. We'd never done this before, but what an amazing group of people. Dan Mahoney said, "Do you really know how to pull a great team together?" And we did. And so my sincere appreciation and thanks to all of them. And again, I hope you all feel the same about the dedication of this group. Okay, Lee, you can turn to the next slide. Yep. Next slide, Lee.
He's working on it.
I see that. All right. So we should also be very proud. Wisconsin is second in the nation in its response rate at 70%. That's an average across the state. Portage County is at 76.4, so we are above the average, which is why we are ranked 78th in the nation. Portage County has remained in the top 100 of all counties responding in the nation since they started taking the census. So our work is obviously panning out and netting great results. Unfortunately, Minnesota is first, and that's why we've got a little bit of, we talked about this at the meeting the other day. Joan Honnold thinks that we need to have a competition between the Bears, or the Vikings and the Packers, to show Minnesota who really is number one, not Minnesota. So again, we're still doing pretty good, but we still have a long ways to go. Next slide. There you will see the response rates as of the 13th. I think they update those once a week. Those are a combination of both those who have responded by email, those have responded via telephone, and those who have responded by paper. So mailed in their responses. As you can see, we have a number of pockets where we really have a very low response rate. And first you'll see Albin, the town of Albin has a very low response rate right now. The town of Oak Plain has a low response rate. Town of Belmont has a very low response rate. I need your help. We need your help. Billions of dollars. We just got done talking about budget, right? We just got done talking about the need for law enforcement personnel. Money coming back to Wisconsin from the census, and you've heard me say this before, I'll say it again, is nearly $9 billion in funding. But if the Census Bureau thinks that nobody lives in the town of Albin or the town of Belmont, do you think they're going to fund roads? Do you think that they're going to fund schools? They will think that our population is not as high as it is. So I'm asking all of you supervisors, wherever you are, to help boost those rates. This is absolutely essential. For instance, City of Stevens Point's at 73.6%. Been working with this is primarily, when you dig into the numbers, the census tract that's most problematic is around the university. So I'm working with the university to get the message out to students who left when COVID broke, that they were supposed to respond, that their residency was in Stevens Point. So hopefully that collaboration will boost those numbers. Next slide. Oh, I want to, before we go, move on to the next slide, I want you to take a look at the town of Grant. And I want to give a shout out to Diana Luck and Vicki Zimmerman from the town of Grant, the treasurer and clerk, respectively. When we started this, I introduced this at a Towns Association meeting. And I pointed out that the town of Grant had a very low response rate in 2010. In fact, their total response rate was about 67%. Diana and Vicki said, oh, you want to make a bet? The town of Grant is going to kick some major butt, and they have. They are second highest in Portage County. They have done a fabulous job. If you know those two women, give them a pat on the back, because they have done amazing work in representing the town of Grant and getting those numbers up. Next slide. The Census Bureau activities right now, of course, you all heard that the field operations are going to be cut short by a month. However, field operations started on the 11th, and I've already seen folks on the street out knocking on doors. If you get calls from your constituents that they have strangers knocking on their door, field operations are going on. They will be credentialed. And so tell your constituents, your friends, your neighbors, ask for the credentials to make sure that they are who they are, say they are, from the Census Bureau, and to please respond to the questions. Reminder letters to those who have yet to respond will be going out later this month that will mirror, again, the outreach for field operations. And the Census Bureau is busy with national advertising. You've probably seen some of it. And they've got a massive social media campaign via Twitter and Facebook. So next. So the Portage County Complete Count Committee activities, of course, we had planned a whole bunch of in-person fun events, which we cannot have, but we still are doing a lot of work. Our outreach to UWSP, most recently, we've been targeting the rural areas in the Elmond area, the Amherst area, and the Junction City area. Joan Honnell has been out just distributing massive amounts of flyers and literature in those areas. In fact, I think she distributed all of the big farm organizations literature and has distributed tons of information out in the Amherst area. The library is still a key partner. Larry and his team, amazing. I'm working with the farmers market now to start distributing flyers there. We sent out over 6,000 documents to the school districts, which they've distributed out in their summer food program. The faith community has been conducting regular outreach at Mass, at services, at Temple. And of course, we've got our great partners, United Way, ADRC, CAP Services, Portage County Literacy Council, and there's many more. And then all of our municipal partners, whether it's the Village of Plover, the City of Junction, our Village Junction Cities, everybody's been just awesome in helping us get the word out. Next, I think it's the last slide. Again, you can help. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your families, your constituents. Please, we need your help to boost those numbers. Make a few calls. If you have an email list of your constituents, send that out. If you have social media, post it on your Facebook page, or if you have Twitter, issue a tweet about the census. Get your followers, your constituents to complete the census for your areas. If you want some flyers that you would like to distribute out to friends, relatives, neighbors, let me know. My garage is now Census Central for documents from the Census Bureau. And again, just help in any way you can. This is critical. We are in the last phases. We need your help. We've got a great team, and I hope we can count on all of you. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Johnson on the census. Supervisor Medine.
Quickly, is there a deadline that we should be aware of?
The deadline for this, Supervisor Johnson?
I believe we're October 1.
Thank you. Anybody else? I would just ask Supervisor Johnson if they have any more of those placemat blotters. I could probably run around some more of those to the restaurants if you have any.
We do indeed. They're in Joan's car right now. I will have Joan. Yeah, Joan and I we've been shifting back and forth all of the literature that we've got. I will have Joan contact you directly, Mr. Chair.
Even if she drops them off at the county clerk, I can get them out of there as well.
All right, we will do that. Thank you.
And email me some of the places that you've been already, so we don't duplicate it. Supervisor Johnson, did you copy that?
I did. I think Supervisor Honnell may want to say something.
Oh, Supervisor Honnell?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. The restaurant situation is really pretty volatile in terms of, who's doing curbside and who's doing, sit down. I started with the Central Wisconsin Masters there and took a look at the restaurants that have been rated and trying to approach them and see if they would accept more of those placemats. But any help getting those placemats out, it really is a very clever design, and I think it's engaging people. So I'll be over with those placemats.
Just drop them off with Kayla and Lee here in the office, please. Right. And if you have a few of the restaurants that you've already done them, leave a list or something with me as well, so absolutely. I don't duplicate efforts. If there's nothing else, we will move on, and thank you for all your efforts on this continuous count. It's very important. So, thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Public notice, members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time, with such comments subject to reasonable control of county board chairs set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. Anyone from the public? So we have our Scott Rifleman on item number 9. Anybody else? Okay. Number 1, Portage County zoning ordinance map amendment, Kittry and Williams property.
Resolution number 19, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. This resolution amends the Portage County zoning ordinance map.
Motion by Supervisor Larry Rakowski, seconded by Splinter. Any discussion? If there's no objections, we're not using the clickers, so all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, resolution to establish a pre-trial services subunit of the Justice Coalition authorized to perform pre-trial release supervision in Portage County.
Resolution number 2020-2022, submitted by the Judicial General Government Committee. This resolution establishes a pretrial services subunit of the Justice Coalition. This resolution, I do have a recommended amendment in the title. Perform is spelled incorrectly.
We will take a motion to get it on the floor. Take a motion by Supervisor Medine, seconded by
Morossi.
Seconded by Supervisor Moresi, and we need a motion for the amendment. And what was it again? What was it, Kayla?
Perform is spelled in the title.
Oh, perform and the title is spelled wrong. To correct that, just make that motion for the amendment, Supervisor Moresi.
Yes.
I need a second from Supervisor Laddick. All those in favor with the amendment? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Back to the original motion. Discussion? So there's no further discussion. All those in favor with the resolution as amended, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3, authorizing a 2020 budget adjustment for the solid waste department due to added environmental liability insurance for the Portage County landfill.
Resolution number 21, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Solid Waste Management Board. This resolution authorizes a budget adjustment for additional expenses related to liability insurance for the solid waste department. It does require a 2/3 supermajority vote. I also do have a recommended amendment for the resolution. There are 3 words spelled wrong in the title: insurance, landfill, and environmental.
First with the resolution. Motion by Supervisor Morrow, seconded by Supervisor Medine. Now with the amendments and the corrections, I'll take a motion.
Yes.
So Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Moresi. Any discussion on the amendment, the corrections? On the amendment, all in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Chairman?
Yes, Stan.
Supervisor Zastro is lifting his hand and nobody is seeing him.
Lee is monitoring that. Are you seeing that, Lee?
It's okay. I could speak up. I was just raising my hand. If you saw it, it was fine. If not.
He's using that to say aye. Is that correct, Supervisor? Yeah. He's not looking for someone's attention. He's using it to vote.
Okay.
Thank you, Stan. Where were we? We're on the amendment. We took a motion on the amendment, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now back to the original resolution as amended. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have the record reflect that I've abstained from this vote. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you.
Got it.
It will reflect. Number 4, authorization for 2019-2020 amended contracts over $100,000 and subsequent budget adjustments for the Health and Human Service Department.
Resolution number 22, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Health and Human Services Board. This resolution authorizes the contract amendment with Energy Services, Inc. and budget adjustment for the Health and Human Services Department. Does require a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Motion by Supervisor Dubek, seconded by Supervisor Gifford. Discussion. No amendments?
You know, that's all.
Good job, Ray. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 5, authorization to the amendment of the 2020 budget for the purposes of funding the 2019 monumentation program.
So, resolution number 23, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Finance Committee. This resolution authorizes a budget amendment to fund the 2019 remonumentation program and requires a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Motion by Supervisor Dodge, seconded by Supervisor Rakowski. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, authorizing the final reconciliation for the fiscal year 2019 for all county funds.
Resolution number 24, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Finance Committee. This resolution authorizes the final reconciliation for the 2019 fiscal year and requires a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Motion by Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 7, establishing November 2nd, 2020 as the official annual meeting date of the Portage County Board of Supervisors for 2020.
Resolution number 25, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Executive Operations Committee. This resolution establishes the date for the annual meeting.
Motion by Supervisor Rakowski. Don't be shy. Supervisor Gussel. Any other discussion? All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 8, amending Portage County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 3, resulting in the creation of a Diversity Affairs and Inclusivityness Committee as a standing committee of the Portage County Board of Supervisors.
Resolution number 26, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Executive Operations Committee. This resolution amends the Portage County Code of Ordinances and creates the Diversity Affairs and Inclusiveness Committee.
Motion by Supervisor Moresi, seconded by Supervisor Zastro. Discussion. All those in favor with aye?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, approving of the 2019 longevity for Clerk of Courts, Register of Deeds, 2019 County Clerk, and the Sheriff.
Resolution number 27, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Human Resources Committee. This resolution approves the longevity benefit for 2019 for the Clerk of Courts, Register of Deeds, 2019 County Clerk, and the Sheriff.
Need a motion to put it on the floor? Need a motion to put it on the floor. Motion by Supervisor Dubek, seconded by Supervisor Splinter, and we had Mr. Rifleman who'd like to speak to the board.
Mass briefly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and county board members. For those of you that may not know me, or for new members, I'm Scott Reifman. I'm your medical examiner for the last 20 months, and I've been your coroner for the last 38 years. So I've been servicing Portage County for the last 40 years, basically, coming up upon 40 years. I have a prepared statement I'd like to make just to, for time's sake. So if you indulge me, I would like to read that. Before you is a resolution accepting years of longevity for your elected officials, including one that has since been retired. The elected position of coroner is not amongst them, but originally it was. Because of my unique position of going from the elected coroner to the now present medical examiner, this needed to be addressed separately by the Human Resources Committee. Beginning back in November of 2019, discussions were underway with all of the electeds about longevity benefits, including me, and again, my position, being unique, was discussed separately. Then, with all that went on with COVID-19 and meeting scheduling, the topic was not brought up again until July 15th of this year, with a joint meeting of Human Resources and Finance Committee, including new members of those committees who had not heard the discussions prior to that. During the July 15th meeting, joint meeting, and prior to the Human Resources voting on the resolution before you now, the Human Resources Committee had to vote on recognizing my years of service as an elected official. When the motion was made on the floor, it died from a lack of second. Then, because the coroner position was on the original resolution before you, a motion and a second had to be made to remove the coroner from the position, from this resolution. When I left the meeting, to be honest, I had a range of emotions. But in all honesty, what upset me the most is that it died from a lack of second, and no discussion was allowed. I was not allowed to express my opinion. The Human Resources Director, Bellinger Test, was not able to discuss policy, history, or past practice, and members of the committee could not debate the issue, ultimately going to an up or down vote. It died from a lack of a second. Beyond this is my concern for the lack of a democratic process. To have a motion come to the floor and then die from a lack of second and not allow any discussions whatsoever, in my very humble opinion, is wrong. I was not able to voice my opinion. The Human Resource Director was not able to discuss her exhaustive research, and I was not able to hear positive or negative reasons as to what the final vote could or would have been. The Human Resources Committee deals with people, personnel, issues, and employees. All should have the right to be heard, and as to hear reasons as to why decisions are made. This was not done in this case. I thank you for your time and attention, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to have our Corp Counsel, David Ray, speak at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday morning, Chair Haga came into my office and shared with me that Mr. Rifleman had made the request of Chair Haga that Mr. Rifleman be allowed to address the board tonight, which he just did. We're grateful to Mr. Rifleman because it gave us, mostly me, the opportunity to do a little digging, unfortunately, into Robert's rules, to come up with an outline for this group, what your alternatives are for how and when you would deal with both this resolution and any amendments or other issues that might go along with it. First of all, we can deal with, or let me say one other thing before we talk about the how-tos and whens. Ultimately, when this resolution in terms of longevity for 2019, and that's the scope of this resolution, longevity for these listed officials only for 2019, gets dealt with, and any other issues that this body might decide to add or take away from the resolution, it's this body that makes the decision. The county board can make the decision either tonight, this evening, or there are also procedures available that would allow the group to postpone it by 1 month to the September meeting. And let me talk about some of the reasons why the group might want to do that. And all of my comments are not in the form of a recommendation. I'm just giving you the tools so that you know which alternatives or which alternative, you're only going to pick one, that you decide to follow, because the group has to make that decision. Most of them are really pretty straightforward, although as the discussion goes along, I'll be able to interject to help out and to share what I found out from my research in Robert's Rules. I'm not going to give you the whole history of what I found, because you don't need it depending on what you do. One of the easier alternatives is to deal with the resolution and make all of your final decisions tonight. You can finalize it. That would be, it could be a simple motion, which we have, to approve the resolution as presented. As can often or always happen on the county board floor, the resolution can be amended if there's a motion to amend, and then we'll deal with that. And the final discussion can be held, final vote can be taken, and the decision could be made tonight. There's two other ways, two other types of motions that the group can use if the group decides that it may be better to postpone all of the action on the resolution until September. The first way to do that is through what's called a motion to postpone. Fairly simple. If the group goes that route, a motion to postpone takes precedence over the motion that's already been made and any amendments. Although if you go with a motion to postpone until the September meeting, it's not necessary to offer amendments to the resolution this evening. That could happen. You'd have the full discussion just like you would on any other motion or matter. You'd have that at the December meeting on this agenda item. Anything can happen with respect to the item. The other type of motion that you can use that would also have the effect of postponing the dealing with the resolution is something called a motion to commit. Commonly, I think we often refer to that as, let's refer it back to the committee or a committee. So a motion to commit would send the resolution and the whole topic back to, it can really be any committee, but since it came out of the HR committee, presumably it would go back to the HR committee. You really can only pick pick one from among the three. So you can do your standard motion, any amendments, deal with it tonight. Keep in mind, though, if there are amendments, because we have time, we don't have to deal with this tonight. We're not losing anything, if I'm not incorrect on that, Laura, from an HR perspective, if we make the decision in September as opposed to tonight. She's indicating yes, shaking her head that I'm correct. We can simply have the motion to postpone, and then everything gets, my analogy that I used with one supervisor when I was talking on the phone today, and I think with our clerk, is that we would just push the squeegee and everything would get moved over onto the agenda for September. So you've got your standard motion, second, which we have, you can deal with it tonight. That's choice one. Choice two, a motion to postpone. The motion to postpone, as well as the third choice, the motion to commit, allows the group to obtain any other information that you may not have before you tonight. Mr. Rifleman indicated that there was this meeting on July 15th of 2020. That was the meeting among 3 committees: Executive Operations, Finance, and HR. There were other items on their agenda, but unless you were at that meeting, and even some who were at that meeting came away, I think, wondering what their vote had meant. And that, if that's true for any of you, especially the ones who weren't there, and you don't understand the implications of, I mean, the resolution itself is pretty straightforward. That's easy enough to understand. But if there's any consideration at all for amending it for the types of points that Mr. Rifleman has raised, or any other points that anybody else wants to add, it would seem that there's no harm in postponing it so that we can get the information. So those are the 3 choices, and I think I've said more than enough, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Supervisor Medine.
If we did make a motion to commit, essentially send it back to resources, these numbers may change slightly because they are, they include the interest due the individuals. So you might be pennies different next month if this came through. Correct?
I would assume. Jenny, are you on there?
Yes, I'm here. So the interest isn't due to the individuals, the interest is due to the board. But that might have to be adjusted. But the numbers would have to be adjusted if you did include other individuals.
I would like to see it taken care of tonight in front of this body, and move on with other things, but that is just my opinion. Supervisor Syke?
I was going to make a motion to postpone.
Second.
We got a motion by Supervisor Syke and a second by Supervisor Moresi.
That's a first.
If I could explain why I'd like to make that second as well, I would appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's the right thing to do to postpone and then bring it back to this body next month. And that way we can have a full story of kind of the history and timeline. So we understand the complexity of this resolution. We'd be remiss to not offer conversation and discussion about this for Mr. Rifleman, having given almost 40 years of his time in service to Portage County. I think regardless of how we feel about elected officials' longevity compensation, we at least owe it. This body owes it to our electeds to at least have the discussion and honor that commitment that we have to them. So along with that, Mike second, I'd like to request that we have a memo from Director Ballinger on kind of the timeline, the history, and our policy, stating what we've done in the past and how we're poised to move forward. I think it would do this body well to have that information so we can make an educated vote and not just deal with it tonight. So I'd like to see us move forward next month as well. Good timeline and move forward. Thank you.
Supervisor Splinter.
I'm hearing about this for the first time, and Mr. Rifleman has served our county for over 40 years in an elected official capacity, in addition to the medical examiner capacity. And if I were him, and I wasn't allowed to speak at a committee meeting, I would have a problem. And he's probably been waiting a while to vent his distaste for the process. And I think rather than postpone this and delay satisfaction to our coroner and our medical examiner, I'll put that as a slash, I would much rather see this amended, if this motion fails, to include the medical examiner dash coroner as part of the longevity, considering the length of time that this Mr. Rifleman has served our county. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would completely agree with Mr. Splinter.
Thank you, Supervisor Pataki. I'm just trying to go through this in my head on how this would all play out. Supervisor Laddick.
Thank you. Is it possible we can hear from our director, balance your tests, and see what she had to say on the situation? I myself would rather get it resolved tonight, and next month we can take care of next month's things. You know, I'm in favor of taking care of it tonight, and I do feel that he was discriminated against and he should be entitled to his longevity.
Ms. Bellinger, would you like to make a comment or speak or field any questions?
I'll just say I'll be happy to, I could go through the little history of it, or I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Dave, I think you were looking for a little quick background.
Just a quick background, you know, if he's, it should be clear, if he's eligible and we should pay him. And I know there was some history with, I believe, Sandy Curtis, where she went from elected to an appointed or hired position, and we paid her longevity. So I think we have some history on it. That
is there a precedence there, Laura, that Supervisor Laddick is talking about?
Sure, I can kind of go through the history a little bit. So back in September of 2019, the HR committee did have a discussion and action on what kind of benefits does Mr. Rifleman get going from an elected position to an appointed position. Usually we have it go the other way, where a person is an employee and then goes to be an elected official. So we had a lot of history on that. We didn't have a lot of history of, especially somebody so long-term, going to being elected to an appointed position. So at that meeting in September, because the transition from the position going from elected coroner to appointed medical examiner was effective 1/7 of 2019. And Mr. Rifleman did apply, and he was offered, and they were interviewed, and he was offered the position. But there was no break in service. So his offer date was effective the same day as the term, or the day after the term ended as coroner. So in February 2019, the HR committee did talk about and discuss what kind of benefits does he get. There was no need in any language changes in the ordinance. It was just kind of a clarification how we would do this. We had brought out maybe like other limited term employees, on-call casual examples, because those are employees who may be hired, who are not eligible for benefits, but then without a break of service may be hired as a permanent position. So we kind of tried to match those up. The only difference is that LTE or on-call casual usually are a year or less than a year before they transition to a permanent, unlike Mr. Rifleman, who was over 30 years. The other thing that we identified was somebody who, through the years as coroner, Mr. Rifleman's number of hours allocated to the position had increased over that 20-25 years. So it started off as like 25% as the coroner, and then went up to 50%, and then went up to like 75%. So the question also was, if we give him benefits back to the date that he was a coroner, you know, he wasn't a full-time person at that time, so should it be prorated or something along those lines. We did talk about like vacation was a big thing, and I think probation period was another thing. At that time, we had talked about, and in a separate meeting, before the HR committee, the county executive Holm and myself and Scott Rifleman had met, and we talked about longevity. And at that time, he said, elected officials don't get longevity. You know, I'm not interested in asking for that at this point in time. So go forward to March 5th of 2020, when there was obviously the resolution that came to this board or this group in March of 2020 about providing elected officials for longevity. And at that meeting, Mr. Rifleman had said, well, if now elected officials are going to be eligible, you know, where does that leave me? Who didn't have a break in service, who had elected official service, and I kind of identify myself now as and close to the people that you're talking about. And there was discussion about going back and researching that. And then it said it would be brought forward at the future meeting. So then he was not included in, there was no amendment to the resolution to include him at that time. That resolution came to the county board, which did change ordinance language to add elected officials in now effective 2020 for longevity. And then in July 15th of 2020, after we had, you know, a break for COVID, we did put it on the joint agenda, basically to get it discussed. I talked with Chair Rachowski, and we said, you know, we're not going to delay this anymore. And we wanted it also to be on an agenda in which medical examiner, just longevity in general, and then the 2019 retroactive for the elected officials, because the two kind of went hand in hand when we were talking about it at the HR committee level. So, and then as Mr. Rifleman had pointed out, in July at that meeting, there was a motion, but there was no second. In between there, the HR committee or HR department did research and see what we could find more on like positions. We did find, going back, we went through records back to the 80s, I think, that longevity was not based on part-time service or anything like that. You know, like vacation, you're prorated if you're, or you're not eligible, I'm sorry, if you're under 20 hours a week. What we found was longevity, employees who are 10 hours a week get it, if you're 5 hours a week, so there was no question of that. So we had that answered. What we also did find is with any on-call or LTEs who transition from, let's say, you know, a non-permanent position to a permanent, there was a variation on what occurred, and it was based on what union they might have been under at the time, what language, policy language applied to them at the time. So there was different variations of what date it went back to, if they got it, when they got it, things like that. We did find then back when I think Sandy Curtis was appointed as a Register of Deeds, and I don't recall what year that was. Cindy probably knows. No, but she was appointed as a Register of Deeds and served for that for 2 years, and then was offered a permanent part-time position at 20 hours a week as the Emergency Management Director, and then served in that role for, I think, 15, 20 years. And went back, and she was provided longevity as a permanent employee based on the date that she was appointed as the elected Register of Deeds. So in the memo that went to the joint meeting on July 15th, I did indicate that and said if somebody was looking, because what came out of the March 2020 meeting was find what's most consistent with practice that we've done in the past. And so that was my recommendation, to go ahead and to be most consistent with what we've done in the past. It seems that it would be to offer Mr. Rifleman longevity based on his day appointed as a coroner from 1981.
Supervisor Syke.
Mr. Chair, I would be willing to rescind my motion to postpone if I could see, and I know I will not be able to see, a gathering to fairly and adequately
I think if you postpone, I think things will fall into place. If
correct, that our Scott Rifleman is adequately compensated for his time as longevity.
Supervisor Moresi.
I will do the same. we agree together again. It's like,
Yeah, this is bad.
Yeah, and that's what I was
Good.
doing in my head, was going through it. So if you two are both withdrawing your postponement amendment, Supervisor Splinter?
I would make an amendment to include the coroner slash medical examiner in back into this original resolution. Due to the unusual situation we have with a long-term servant of the county. Thank you.
I have a motion by Supervisor Splinter to put the medical examiner back into the longevity, and a second by Supervisor Pataki. Discussion. Supervisor Neville.
I don't fully understand at this point. I mean, I heard what was said. I think I understand some of it, but I don't understand how this really happened. And I would not be in favor of going ahead tonight because I don't feel I fully understand and can vote appropriately. And I don't see a problem with postponing, which I realize that's not the motion at the moment, but I don't see it. This is my discussion. I don't see a problem with postponing and giving us all a chance to understand it completely and deal with it next month. But that's just, I wanted to say that. So I'm certainly not opposing this, but I also don't feel that I fully understand it. Thank you.
And I think that Supervisor Laddick was trying to clear some of that up with Mrs. Bellinger about what our precedents or what our past reflect, and also what the recommendations were out of from staff for this particular position. I have a question on procedure, Dave. So I'm looking at this, if it goes up or down. If it fails, can they reinstitute the postponement on the amendment? It would, if let's say for some reason that if this passes, it passes. If it fails, the amendment, can someone offer up the postponement amendment after that?
Yes, because the resolution itself will not have been voted on yet.
Okay, good.
Laura had a question, and then I've got something too.
Laura?
It might be the same thing that Corp Counsel is going to address, but I wanted to make sure that, and kind of walking this through my head too, and for us administratively, who's then going to go forward with this, is by adding him into this resolution, that would provide him for, again, I think Corp Counsel had mentioned this is for 2019 only. So the March 2020 resolution was what provided the benefit for the medical examiner going forward. That's why it wasn't in the 2019. So we would need three things, and depends on what you want. If you just want to provide 2019, then that'd be fine. But one other thing that we would need to know as staff is, as of what effective date would he be given the benefit, credit for how many years of service would be something that we would need to know from this board. And then if you wanted to make sure that it was going forward for 2020 and forward, then there would have to be something to indicate that also.
So Laura, let me be clear. In your talk before this, you had said that your recommendation was back to 81.
So Mr. Reichelman was appointed as the coroner as of August 3rd, 1981.
And was that your recommendation when you had stated it earlier?
Yes.
Do you need a motion on that, Mr. Chair?
And then what was the third one? What was the third one, Laura?
So the other item would be, if it's not only for 2019, it would be to make sure that there's language to include something along the lines of and for future years.
Wasn't it already dealt with for 2020 with the rest of the elected
He
staff?
was not included in that resolution.
Supervisor Moresi, then Supervisor Chai.
Actually, Supervisor Moa has been waiting longer than me, so I can wait for her.
Well, you go ahead. You go ahead, Vinny. I'll go after you because if you have something to contribute to what's
Well, my question is could this be as simple as I know that we need special language, but could this be something as simple as just mimicking the resolution language from March? You know, just saying that all elected officials are going to be getting the same benefit from 2020 forward and including 2019. Maybe I just made that more confusing. I don't know.
Dave? Now I'll offer my suggestion because I think we've reached a point in the discussion where I'll suggest a solution and then the group can do what it would like depending upon what motions it wants to make. I'm hearing that there would likely be a motion to amend to include all of the things that Laura Bellinger-Tess just outlined with respect to the coroner or medical examiner, now medical examiner. And if that's the case, we can have that motion to amend and a second, and then we can do one of two things. We can either vote on that tonight and then vote on the main motion, or we can move again to postpone to the September meeting, which would then allow probably me, because I've got the language here, in conjunction with the HR director, to actually draft the wording for the resolution, and then all that the group would likely be voting on in the September meeting would be the revised resolution that's down on paper. I think I can read it to the group tonight, but there's like 3 or 4 different things that you're going to be doing it from memory, but it's whatever your preference is.
Supervisor Moore?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, everyone. So this is not contributing to what this discussion. I just want to also acknowledge that, you know, I like that we're moving and looking at language and all of that. I don't know what may have happened at that meeting, but I do want to just also bring up a concern that I'm hearing, aside from including the medical examiner in the longevity, and the benefits, but you know, like I'm hearing your voices being. I'm hearing meetings run where folks actually don't get to voice how they feel, and I just don't want us. We can talk about the language, but I didn't want us to overlook that and not see that someone was expressing the impact that it had on them, not being able to voice their voice in the current meeting that we had.
Supervisor Morrissey, did you have something to add as well again?
Okay, thank you.
What did he say? No?
No.
So we have a motion on the floor to amend, to add the medical examiner, Mr. Rifleman. We need to know if we're going to take that back to 1981, as well as the start date of 2019 and forward. Is that your wishes, Mr. Splinter?
I would take it back to 1981. If you're looking at longevity benefits,
as a start point for calculating it, and then for him to be compensated for 2019 and forward.
Yeah, I mean, if I was working for Century for 35 years and they reclassified me in the last year, I would sure as hell want to be my benefits based on when I started service for the county. And he's been a consistent servant of our county, doing a rather distasteful job for the county when he's needed. So I wouldn't want to get inside his head of what he's seen over all those years. So I think going back to 81 is my intention of that.
So you want to include those items in your amendment?
Correct.
Supervisor Pataki, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, is everybody clear?
No, I'm not
No.
clear.
What part are you lacking, Mr. Supervisor Dobek?
I want to know numbers, like this chart here.
Laura, do you have any numbers or rough numbers from
I
when
do.
We do. We can answer those questions, Supervisor Dobek.
So for just the 2019 longevity, it would be at 4% of the salary because our longevity schedule for management gives credit for 1%, 2%, 3%, and 4%. 4% is after 25 years. The 2019 longevity would then be calculated at $2,937 with then FICA does have to be paid on that and hospital tax. Mr. Rifleman does not currently collect with WRS, so there would be no calculation for that. And it would increase the total for 2019 with the estimated interest, which his would not include, of approximately $19,067.
So what was the total roughly? $3,000?
Yep, $2,937.
Okay. And Supervisor Neville, you had some questions? I'd like to clear them up for you, or try to.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we have time to clear them up for me because I'm not completely sure what I don't understand about this. But the fact that it went through a process that involved 3 committees and then ended up with us here tonight. I say went through 3 committees, but I see Ms. Dodge is shaking her head. I thought it was said that there was a joint meeting.
So let me just touch on that point. That meeting was set up because there was other items that were on there besides that, and part of it was the first time we were having HR and finance brought together. And when we first initially talked about that, we thought we would have executive ops in there as well. Executive ops didn't motion or make any get the chance to vote on any of the items, but the part that was important was the fact that HR was doing things that were involving financial issues, and those financial issues that if HR were to approve something, it should go to finance, and finance has to figure out how it's going to pay for it. They were able to cover these items with longevity within each of their own budgets, so there was no budget adjustment, so there was no reason for finance to act on it. But if they had not been able to cover them within their budgets, finance would have probably had to approve money or funding. Otherwise, if HR approved the longevity at that time, and then it went to the finance committee on a couple days later, and they said, where's the money coming from? We're not approving the money. It's like a moot point. It didn't happen. So by having those 2 groups together to talk about it at the same time is important, as I felt, and I wanted the 2 committees to see that going forward, how the 2 interact with each other, and how with one making something happen, that it's important that the other one makes it happen as well. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. So that was the reason for that 3 committee meeting. And it wasn't only that particular item, but it was several other items that were on the agenda as well. And they all had money in the same issues dealing with them. But I don't know if finance even acted on any of them because the money part of it in this particular case did not come up. But depending on how things would have went, there's the possibility that it could in that meeting or in the future. And I believe the feedback I got from the 2 was it was a good meeting for those 2 to be together because they have the opportunity to talk about issues at that time or to hear opinions all at the same time or ask each other questions. So.
Well, what happened in the meeting where the motion was not seconded and Mr. Rifleman did not get to speak.
Correct.
I'm sorry to see that something goes through a process like that and gets on the floor with us. And because I'm not a member of finance, I'm not a member of health and human services, I don't have the background in all of those things. As much as I'd like to say, oh, you told me and I've got it, I don't. And I would like to see us deal with it next month when we have wording, when we've had time to get any details worked out. And I can't see any harm in dealing with it next month. So that's my position. Thank you.
We may very well after this vote. Supervisor Pataki.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let all the supervisors, I'm sure they know about it, but the $19,000 is not just for the medical examiners, for all the different, the clerk of court, register of deeds, county clerk, and the sheriff also.
Supervisor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to ask Attorney Ray and Director Ballinger, is there anything else that we need to add or consider so that when we take this vote, we have all the nuances in place, we have everything in place so we do not have to deal with this again?
I'm not aware of anything else that needs to be added. However, my suggestion is that whether a vote is taken on the amendment tonight or not, because again, you don't have to vote on the amendment. You can have a motion to postpone, and then the written language can be put down on paper. Matters not to me. I can recite, I've got it in my notes here, the language that would need to be changed in the resolution. It's up to the board if it's comfortable or not voting on the amendment and the original motion based on what I read, because then we're going to have to take it from the transcript of the recording for the meeting, and we'll have to actually type up a new resolution or a revised resolution. It's not new.
That means it would come back again after it's been typed up, or no, it goes on? Okay.
Not if you vote on it tonight.
Right.
If there's a motion to postpone, yes, then the group would see the revised written resolution, and all it would be doing in all likelihood is simply voting on it in September. There might be a little bit of discussion, but most of that is happening right now.
Supervisor Dodge and Supervisor Laddick.
So the elected officials all stated that they could cover this in their budgets. I'm not clear whether or not the medical examiner can cover his by his budget.
He's shaking his head yes.
Okay, then that's the answer.
There's your answer. Supervisor Laddick.
Thank you. Could Corp Counsel Ray read back what he's got so far on this amendment? So we're all clear on it then?
Yes, I'm happy to. So, and follow along if you would on the resolution that's in your packet on the second to the last page. The first change would be in the title where it says Ray approval of 2019 longevity for clerk of courts, etc. At the end of the title, we would then add in and medical examiner for 2019 and thereafter. That's just in the title. Then count down in the whereas paragraphs with me, if you would, to 1, 2, 3, to whereas paragraph number 4 in the current resolution. And these are minor changes, but I think it will help clarify things. So my suggestion is that there it would read, whereas at the July 15, 2020 Human Resources Committee meeting, the committee reviewed and recommended the positions of Clerk of Courts, Register of Deeds, 2019 County Clerk, and Sheriff receive longevity payment for 2019. So that just clarifies historically what happened at that meeting. Then there would be a new 5th whereas paragraph that would probably read, whereas the current medical examiner shall also receive the longevity benefit effective 2019 and thereafter until no longer eligible, based on a date of service of, or probably initial date of service, of August 3, 1981. And then the fiscal note would be changed to read, the estimated cost for the 2019 longevity is $19,067. There are no further appropriations necessary, and this will be funded from within each department's 2020 budget. And lastly, the now therefore be it resolved language at the end of the resolution would be revised to read as follows. Now therefore be it resolved that the Portage County Board of Supervisors hereby approves 2019 longevity for Clerk of Courts, Register of Deeds, 2019 County Clerk, Sheriff, probably then semicolon, and be it further resolved that longevity be approved for the current medical examiner for 2019 and thereafter, based on an initial date of service of August 3, 1981, pursuant to, and then it's resolution 222-2018-2020, which is the resolution that the county board adopted back on March 17th when we revised the ordinance to say that we're going to provide longevity for these folks. And I think that covers everything.
All right. So, Supervisor Rakowski.
I need some clarification on regarding the approval where you said and thereafter regarding the county clerk, because it's a one-year deal for the county clerk.
The 2019 county clerk?
Yes.
If I said and thereafter with respect to all of those other folks, I misspoke. No. So the main resolution stays the same. It's only dealing with 2019. The concept of 2019 and thereafter would only apply to the amendment that we're talking about, which is adding longevity for the medical examiner position.
Lee, is somebody else?
Chris Holmes.
Mr. Holman? Executive Holman?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question for Dave. And to be clear, this does not apply to me at all. But as I sit here thinking about it, does it make any sense at all to include every elected position for this? Or are we going to only say these several and leave out the other elected positions? And if so, how does that play out one way or the other from your perspective, Dave? Just because someone could conceivably work for the county for so many years and then run for county executive, become county executive, and then you'd have to have this conversation again whenever that happens, conceivably.
Yeah, conceivably. Laura's going to chime in too.
I think we addressed that in the March 17th, 2020 amendment to the ordinance. So it did just include in elected officials who had, and I'll air quote, date of hire, because there's this kind of date of or elected time. And it only applies like it would for permanent employees for those who were hired before October 1st, 2011. That was the original intent of this, was to bring in elected officials who were employed with Portage County in some fashion prior to 2011 without a break in service. So you couldn't have a break in service, and treat them as we have permanent employees, because permanent employees hired after October 1st, 2011 are not eligible for longevity.
That's correct. So I think, Mr. County Executive, your question was taken care of on the vote by the county board in March of 2020 when we changed the language in the ordinance.
Okay,
Laura's nodding in the affirmative.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor Astro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to call the question as to the amendment as read by David Wright.
We have an amendment on the floor. If there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll on the amendment only.
Supervisor Dubek.
Aye.
Supervisor Reeser. Is he on?
Yes.
Supervisor Reeser.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnson.
Aye.
Supervisor Hano. Supervisor Hano.
Nay.
Nay. Nay. Supervisor Morrow.
Aye.
Supervisor Robbie. Thumbs up. Supervisor Gifford.
Aye.
Aye. Supervisor Martinson.
Aye.
Supervisor Zastro.
Aye.
Supervisor Stoik.
Aye.
Supervisor Laddick.
Aye.
Supervisor Splinter.
Aye.
Supervisor Medine.
Aye.
Supervisor Mula.
Aye.
Supervisor Morossi.
Aye.
Supervisor Pataki. Supervisor Pataki.
Aye.
Supervisor Ande.
Aye.
Supervisor Neville.
Abstain.
Okay. Supervisor Dodge.
Yes.
Supervisor Gussel.
Aye.
Supervisor Haga.
Aye.
Supervisor Rakowski.
Aye.
So we have 20 in favor, 1 nay, 1 abstained, and 3 excused. Amendment passes.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the resolution. If there's no further discussion.
Resolution as amended.
As amended, correct. All those in favor with the amended resolution, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I got a Neville abstain. Opposed?
No.
Who is no?
Johnson.
Supervisor Johnson.
And
And
Hano.
Hano.
Just to clarify, Supervisor Hano and Johnson are noes and Supervisor Neville is abstained.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That would be 19 in favor, 2 nays, 1 abstained, and 3 excused.
Motion carries. Thank you for everybody's input. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Gussel, seconded by Supervisor Splinter. All those in favor with aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.